Thanks for joining us for this edition of To My Way of Thinking, a conversation with the tree shakers, policymakers, and those persons who are going to contribute to our community, state, and nation. Today, we're going to speak with Gary Koniz. Gary is what I would call a sort of an email blogger. He speaks and writes on a number of subjects and issues. He's a management consultant, a syndicated reporter, correspondent, Vietnam vet, and currently also a Republican candidate for the U.S. House. Gary, thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm honored, sir. Thank you so very much, Mr. Matthews, for inviting me.
All right. Well, we've got a myriad of topics that you write about, and I've been intrigued by those over the last few years that I've gotten all your emails, and I just could not wait to have this conversation with you. You talk about a lot about what basically is about improving America as you see it, and the things that need to be done to get us there. You have a unique perspective on that. What's the state of America? What's the state of our state? Let's start there. What's the state of our state here in Florida and the state of America as you see it?
I believe right now we're under a siege of ideology and different attitudes of how we're going to conduct ourselves here. And we need some kind of leadership to take charge of how this arrangement of our living arrangement is going to proceed. Obviously, here in the United States, we have a certain orientation. Based on our founding fathers, we have the issue of slavery as it came up, very divisive issue in the country. How that's ever going to be resolved in terms of the peaceful accord here, living together, is something that's still being discussed and to be worked out. We have some substantial issues going on now at the southern border being overrun. We feel very badly for all these people that are suffering that come to this country. Exactly what we're going to do with them, I really don't have any idea as to how this should proceed. So we're very much up in the air right now, Mr. Matthews, and it's up to a lot of other people too to come to terms with how we're going to do the job of getting to live at peace here with one another. I firmly believe, and I hope and pray that we resolve the issue of the drugs, the heroin and the fentanyl especially, that are coming into this country. There's stern measures that need to be taken for this to get accomplished. And we need to address the issue of posse comitatus, the use of the National Guard in conjunction that can be ordered by the governor, in our case, Governor Ron DeSantis, to intervene forcefully in the drug-infested areas, heavily crime areas and weapons and whatnot that are there, and to take control of the substance of the smuggling of drugs into our country, which I believe are destroying this country and creating an ideological and political bloc oriented to these drugs and the use of drugs. That people in the upper tiers of our society become addicted to these drugs. They're in favor of keeping them alongside of us, so we're not really able to get rid of them without some use of military force. And this posse comitatus can also be used to repel this invasion at the southern border, which I believe that should never have been allowed to occur. What are we going to do with all these people? Where are we going to put them? How are they going to be fed, housed, clothed, and sheltered, and given medical care? Nobody's thinking about that. We're just being overrun. So there's some vague idea about liberality and everybody's being at peace. We're all for that, but there has to be some common sense logic in this as well. So with that, I'll turn that over to you if you have any other further inquiries into that subject.
Well, let's start with the posse comitatus interest that you have. What are you talking about? We already have each state has the ability to have its own National Guard governed by the governor and supported by the taxes in that state. And if need be, they're supported. If need be, when time comes, they are backed up by federal troops if the president deems to go in there. But posse comitatus can mean different things to different people. How do you see what role can a posse comitatus do if the citizens in a particular community? And this is one of the things that the drug dealers and drug sellers have always said, particularly those in South America and Mexico in the early days when we had a bigger problem with them. Now our problem is far more south of that in Colombia, where the drugs are sent in. They're saying that if Americans wouldn't use fentanyl, which is basically a legally obtainable drug, by the way, it is not something that necessarily you have to have smuggled in. These things, up until recently, these things were easily obtainable with the prescription from your drugstore. Walgreens or CVS or Save Rite Aid, any of them would give you the drug as long as you had a prescription for it from your doctor. So these are things that Americans got a hold of in recent times without having to worry a whole lot about what was being shipped across the border. It's only when these particular drugs became so popularized and so needed by Americans that and who didn't want to wait for a prescription, that it has become the epidemic that it is right now. What role possibly would the posse comitatus have in trying to stem the tide of that?
Well, first of all, the issue of drugs being popularized and accepted as is more of a substance of addiction, so that these drugs, people become addicted to these drugs. Back 50 years ago, when a prescription for painkillers were issued by the doctor would strictly manage the person getting weaned off. It was a biological factor that they had to go through with the medical profession. That's why it was in the hands of the medical profession, not to keep these people on these drugs for very long, which was just for the emergency of the pain that they were suffering at the present time, morphine and whatnot. So people do become addicted and they need medical attention in that regard. But the issue of the drugs being so prevalent in our society needs to be handled militarily, to take the drugs out and to get rid of the people who are supplying the drugs traffickers and the smugglers of these drugs, to get them off the streets and whatever it is. I'm advocating for the death penalty for people smuggling these heroin and drugs into the country who are caught with enormous amounts of drugs.
Now it sounds like you're in favor of what the President Duarte did in the Philippines over the last 4 years or so. He put the military, he militarized the police and did exactly that in the Philippines. He went in and strong-armed families and homes and anybody on the street dealing, put them in jail, locked them up, and threw away the key for several years. A whole lot of rights were violated during that process. But the use of drugs and selling of drugs went down in the Philippines, but it was a heck of a way to do it. Are you suggesting that we do something similar to what Duarte did in the Philippines?
Well, they're doing something like that from Buffalo. That's where I'm from, Buffalo. I was originally involved in the narcotics intervention in the state of New York for many, many years. And point out to you that these drugs can also be used as chemical weapons against other people, in hitting people with drugs. LSD, PCB, heroin, cocaine. Once you hit people with heroin, they're in serious trouble. And so this is another factor. They're not allowing these drugs into the community. But in Buffalo right now, they're going through those neighborhoods, policing house to house, door to door, posse comitatus with the National Guard, and rolling in military equipment style vehicles to do this. And so this is just one aspect of trying to get to the bottom and get in touch with the people about what's going on there. There's something that needs to be intervened to. So this is what's happening now. And the heroin and cocaine, things that are snorted up your nose, they snort heroin up their nose and they walk around in public like it's not going to, it affects other people, and they know it affects other people. The dust and the particulates of the heroin, it's like heroin cigarette smoke. So it's not something that can cohabitate with us in that regard. So something drastic has to be done. We're calling all the people of the communities that are involved here to take an interest in getting rid of these drugs themselves, house to house. Who's dealing? Where are they dealing from? How can we intervene to stop them from doing that and get the guns off the streets? So that's on that level. So what do you have to say about that? Anything?
Well, I mean, I think that you're talking about militarizing a number of communities that, in some cases, experienced that during the big crack epidemic of the '90s. I just don't. I don't see any popular sentiment, even among conservative politicians, for doing such an act, because again, the issue most recently, it has a lot to do with the social environment that people find themselves in, and the lack of help, mental help that they need. And in the case of what we found out during the crack epidemic, and still continues to a great extent today, it's about the economics. It's about how am I going to make, for the seller at least, it's about how am I going to make money for my family, for me to achieve this great American dream. For those on the using end, it's an education issue. It's about, it appears to be about giving them the help that they need to get off of these drugs, to wean themselves away from it, and throwing more people in jail with cells room that we simply don't have. It doesn't appear to be very popular with any of the powers to be at this point in time. Let's move to the border. You write a great deal about the issue at the southern border, as do a lot of conservative writers and across the country, concerned about the illegals coming into this country for one reason or another. The past administration did a psychological move in terms of building a wall, a great metal wall across the southern United States that hasn't necessarily proved a way to keep people out, but it does serve as a great big symbol of don't come in. When the present administration came into office, they basically told people, don't come up here, don't come in, you don't have it. But we still have a lot of people wanting to come to America because of the hope and promise that we have here. And now, of course, as we record this, we have the issue in Ukraine, the war that's taking place there, what's basically a civil war between Russians that is causing more people to leave there. And for some way, they're able to get all the way from Ukraine, fly across the Atlantic Ocean and land in Mexico and come through the border. And all the indications are they're being let in without very much discussion. So what's your general thought, if you would just crystallize that a bit for our viewers? What's your general thought about what's happening at the southern border and the issue of illegal aliens in general?
It's chaos. That's what it is. And we need to get some strong intervention in there. These people need to be put up, sheltered somehow, taken care of. We need to displaced persons camps to put these people in so that they can receive the proper food, education, medical care that they need. They're coming from all over the world to come here.
But we are doing that. Here in Jacksonville, Lutheran Social Services has been doing that for years.
Oh, bless their hearts.
Or from people all over the country. You can go down there and find that they've been sheltering them, they've been educating them, they've been helping them to apply to the immigrant, through the proper legal channels to get legal and start to work their way through the process, the citizenry process. And I'm sure that's been happening all over the country. So we've been doing that. The only issue for this is that because of the problems in Colombia and other South American countries, believe it or not, Mexico has gotten a hold of their problem where we don't have as many Mexican, quote, illegals coming here now. Most of the Mexican Americans that are here on work visas, and we can see them working on the housing all around the city. Because the first level of housing that's put up is you usually find Latinos there putting up the framework, and they're being contracted by by a general contractor. And the same thing that's been happening for years in the farming industry. A lot of them are immigrants who are working those farms because guess what? A lot of Americans don't want to work the farm anymore. So the framework is there. It's just that we have a lot of people who are having trouble in their country coming here. So it's not as if we don't have, we just have a whole lot of people and they're not flowing through. They still have to go through a process and they're still stuck in Mexico. I mean, are you seeing that or are you seeing something different?
No, I see all what you're saying. What is it you propose that we do with them? I'm interested in your point of view, Mr. Matthews.
Well, what we do with them is what we're doing now. And that is bring them through the process. Those who qualify to come in immediately are being allowed to come in immediately. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't have a whole bunch of people who are being brought in by coyotes all along the border and elsewhere who are sneaking in here illegally and doing that. That's going to happen because you can build a wall, but guess what? You can fly over it. You can build a wall, but guess what? You can dig under it. You can build a wall, but you can saw your way through a hole and get here. That's a different issue than the process that we do have in place, unless there's something that's missing. There's still a number of people who are sitting in Mexico waiting to be processed to get through this side. They're not flowing through like a giant sieve. We just have a lot of people at the border who want to come here. And of course, that's being exacerbated to an extent by the number of Ukrainians that are coming here, temporarily or not, while their war is being handled. They may very well go back, but the process is there. I don't think the Border Patrol is violating that process. None of the congressmen who've gone there, as far as I know of, both Republican and Democrat, have indicated there's any great violation of our immigration policies. It's just a whole lot of people at the border trying to get into the U.S. Do you see something different?
Yeah, I see all the governors of the southern states are all getting together and they're complaining that the immigration laws of this country are being violated. And what are we supposed to do if the laws are being violated and there's no one to enforce them?
Well, that's rhetoric. There's no proof to that. That's rhetoric. There's no proof to that. No one has filed, to my knowledge, no one has really filed, none of the states have filed a suit that points directly to a violation of the U.S. immigration policies, either by the Border Patrol, by the immigration services. Now, there is, yes, the current administration did up the cap of immigrant visas and those who would be allowed to come in for under certain specific circumstances, but they still have to fill out the paperwork. They still have to get registered. They still need to have a relative in country, especially in the case of children, that will take them in. And for those who are coming in here, they have to prove that they're coming in because of exigent circumstances, as has been noted in what's happening in Honduras and in Colombia. Believe it or not, even like Mexico is less so now, but there's a severe issue in Colombia and obviously in Haiti with their continuing political turnovers and gangland activities there. But the process is there. It just appears when we see it on television, it appears to be more so than it is, but there just isn't, other than what we see and what people are telling us, there's just not any evidence that the U.S. is violating its own immigration policy.
Well, all right, that's what you're saying there. I know that the governors of Texas, Arizona, New Mexico have all filed some suit recently to an injunction to get the president to intervene in the overrun that's occurring now. I love all the people of the earth here. I'm very happy. Right here in Jacksonville, we began with this limited space of where we live. And I'm kind to everybody. I go out into the world each day and I say, hello, how are you doing? How's everything going? Nice day. And everybody's so polite and friendly. So I don't think we have a specific problem here. People are working very industriously, as you say. And I think that as long as we can maintain a harmony among ourselves, we're going to be in really good shape no matter what happens. But how long is it going to sustain the open border policy that the president administration has now? How many people can come in before it becomes absurd? Tens of millions more? Where are they going to go? Where are they going to find work? Housing, as I mentioned to you the previous letters now. They're raising all the rents 20, 40, 50%, right off the bat to renew your lease. The rents are going up from $1,200 to $1,700. And they just had an article on the news last night about Tampa and all these other, they're doubling the rents. The rents are so exorbitant. There's no really rent control legislation in place to protect the tenants' rights. We have the right to the landlords are taking over our right to live here in our own homes. So by raising our rents, where's this money going to come from to pay to do that? So we need to come down to resolving how these people are going to be funded. I propose that we initiate what is called a fiat money legislation to be able to issue currency based on the full faith of the United States government and all its assets and everything to back this money, to use that money to support the immigration and to provide jobs for all the people that need jobs, the Bureau of Jobs, and all the other issues that we have to come to terms with to continue on with our society in an appropriate way. So let's get that resolved, the fiat money bill legislation. Instead of just saying, oh, we're going to issue money, we're going to print money, we're not printing money, we're issuing the currency legally in a supplement to offset the deficit of full faith taxation that we have, the traditional taxation based on the incomes and whatnot of the people. So let's continue on with that to see how that goes. I'm trying to run that through the legislature now, along with a war on heroin, drafted the bill that I've emphasized using the posse comitatus to the police complaining they have no manpower. They don't have the manpower to police. They're terrified going to those districts. So something has to be done before we can implement the social work that we need to do to stop people from becoming addicts. But somehow the drugs got to be taken off the streets in order for us to have a safe society. The one other item I'd like to mention is racial relations. And it's a touchy topic with a lot of people. But my feeling is that whites marry whites, blacks marry blacks, and people of color marry people of color. That way the races stay in harmony with each other. We have the Native Indians, the Asians, Asiatic peoples. And so if they all live in harmony, there's no conflict between them as far as the racial issues are concerned for sexual procreation. The white race could be wiped out by intermarriage with all the other races. So there's a profound sentiment among white people to protect the white race. And I think that's where a lot of the conceived prejudice is coming from. It's not necessarily directed at the specific black or colored people of color, but over the issue of the intermarriage relationships.
Well, so I mean, that's an interesting point that and an interesting thought process that a lot of people are going through right now and have adopted. But the simple issue is that people are attracted to people. It doesn't make any difference what race you are, what nationality you are. We're all human beings. And if attraction is there for another human being, you're not going to see their race or their nationality. You're going to see that. Many a young soldier from World War II, from World War I, and particularly World War II, and then in Vietnam, Korea, and in Vietnam. Once they took that was their first opportunity to go overseas and be in an entirely different country with people with different mores and habits and talents and customs. And it was amazing to many of us that these people even existed and that they accepted you. And many a soldier brought many a girlfriend who became a wife back to this country. And so we have what we have. Those countries, as you know, are homogeneous. America is not and has never been, because from the time that the Pilgrims landed here and met up with the Indians and stayed with the Indians, they began to procreate across lines. From the time that the slaves were brought here to the Americas and were enslaved, what did we find is that they began to procreate with Anglo-Americans. read Thomas Jefferson, might I say? And so it continues on. We're not going to, if we were a homogeneous society, if we were in Ukraine, for instance, where there are barely any Africans except for those who come there on a student visa, they can do what they want to do. They can have that attitude in Russia because they don't have there's only basically one race. They can do that in China. But it's difficult for us to do it here in the US because we have a history of miscegenation, as they used to call it, of getting together with everybody in the race. And those people got kinfolk across the border. So do you see, are you saying, and I don't think the white race needs to be protected. They just, if you want to mix among your own, mix among your own. But the problem is the kids always do what the parents don't want them to do.
Well, the issue is there, sir, that the offspring of the white and the black person, the mulatto person of color, is often rejected about when they want to come back into the white society because they're off color.
That might have been a thing among your generation and to an extent among mine, but I don't see that much rejection.
Well, it's still there. And it's seeding underneath the sentiments of the right people. But this is a reasoning thing that we have to work out. Whether or not, sure, people are going to fall in love, they're going to do this. I mean, I know the logic of that, but I'm just saying that thinking beyond that is to have respect for the races as they exist as races. When you mix the race, it's no longer the race anymore. It's a different species, a different element. So which is not.
Why worry about the races at all? Why is that a concern about the races? Well, shouldn't we be concerned first about humanity, about human beings? Why this concern about races in this country? Why the concern about that?
Because race matters. This is the issue of India. There are no white people in India hardly anymore. This all happened 7,000 years ago. In the Great War in Heaven that occurred, and the mixing of the races there. And it followed, it was in the Crusades, the Moors overran the Iberian Peninsula. They were driven down into Africa, and in Africa they enslaved the black people and shipped them over here to the United States to start all over again.
But but all of those activities was about religion and economics. It wasn't about necessarily races. If they didn't want to mix the races, they wouldn't have had sex with them. They wouldn't have had sex with each other. Though all of those issues, the Crusades, the England taking over India, France and Portugal going into Africa, all of those things are about economics and what they needed to have workers to work their fields and to mine the mines down there and make money for them. And shipping the slaves over here was about economics. If they didn't want to mix the races, they shouldn't have had sex with them, but they did, and they continually did it. So, I mean, there's not a whole lot of validity to folks who want to maintain racial purity because too many folks are violating that rule. And I don't see how that's ever going to come to fruition.
Let's not make it a rule. Let's just make it a respect for the race, the issue of race itself. You see, the black people are really black. The people that are from Africa, I mean, they're really black people. And then the other people are people of color. This is I'm all for everybody living their lives here and being happy. I'm just saying that this is an issue that needs to be thought about. Can we just say it needs to be thought about?
Oh yeah, we can say it needs to be thought about, but okay. I think people have already thought about it and they're moving. they're moving on.
Well, they're moving on, but so is the reaction to it moving on. So let's try and heal the wounds that exist as we see them. These are good topics.
You have your name down to run for the U.S. House of Representatives. Why are you doing that?
Because I feel that I can persuade certain issues and lines of reasoning, as the topics that I've touched upon, to take place in the United States so that we can all achieve a peaceful resolution here, a sentiment of ideological resolution. The ideology of the United States is what needs to be worked on. How are we going to proceed forth in this matter of respect for one another? is the issue at stake at this hour. That's why I need to go to Congress.
Now, if you get elected to Congress, and especially this coming term, and the Republicans are successful in taking back the House, but let's say they take back the House, but they don't take back the Senate. How are you going to get, and the president will still be the president, how are you going to get any legislation passed and signed without the other side? How are you going to get legislation passed and signed?
By persuasion, exactly what is correct here. Mm-hmm. The correct thinking needs to prevail. Something, as I said when we started out the discussion before we went on the air, this is God's earth. And I would just, what would it be like what would the kingdom of heaven be like here if we lived here now? I always throw out that paradigm because it's something that people need to think about. Sex is what it is. It's a beast sometimes. It doesn't need to be so preoccupying everyone's thoughts that they have all these ideas about who they're going to have sex with. The idea is children, procreation, and the lives that we live here being of good quality. That's the important issues. So I believe that we can do that. Just opening up dialogue like you and I have done today, mm-hmm. and exchanging ideas. I thought that was a wonderful thing. The many ideas that we exchanged. I'm grateful for that. But I think this needs to occur. And your work needs to occur on a very large scale. So I hope that you get the publicity you need to take this further.
Well, that's what we're working on. That's one reason why you're here. I'm going to pose to you a tough question. Do you think that Donald Trump should run again for the presidency in 2024?
Well, I don't know, but I don't know if he should. If he was going to run, I don't think we should oppose him. I think he's rough on the edges, but he's a good businessman, and he had the economy straightened out. So if you would think about that, the Keystone Pipeline and oil independence, and all the other things that we need to do to move the economy. I think he was a very aggressive businessman in our regard. His politics, the personalized politics, he has some rough edges. I think people need to talk to him, get him aside and tell him to cool it a little bit. Ron DeSantis is also very good. His name has been going out there. And as well as many other fine politicians too as well.
Well, I mean, those are the top two. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, and by all of the tales of the pundits, everything he's doing right now is about 2024 because he's not going to have he doesn't have any serious competition to be reelected as governor, and no one in the Florida House and Senate are in any serious trouble of not being reelected. So the Florida House and Senate and governorship will all be in Republican hands for at least the next decade. As we now sit, and it looks like we'll probably get at least two more Republican aimed seats for the Florida House in the state of Florida. So that would help get that Republican majority in the House in the coming years. So to wrap this up, we're coming to the end of this particular conversation. I'd like to have you back again to talk a bit more about some of the other things that you've written about. But you're embroiled in a bit, without giving us too much detail, but you've been embroiled in a bit of discussion about rent payments and the rent payers' rights versus landlord rights. And you filed a suit recently about that. But I always have to remind folks is that our government, quite frankly, is geared a lot toward business and less toward individual rights. It was about how the businessmen can best be served. And if the individuals can get something out of that, fine. But our Florida government has been all about what the landlord rights are and what business rights are. We are not a union state. We are not in favor of unions. That's why the only unions that are remaining are teachers union, a few AFL-CIO labor unions around, and the Republican Party stays in direct opposition to any of that. Those kind of things which give individual rights. So how are you approaching this government that basically has things in favor of the landlord, the business owner?
My thinking is this, I should say, our thinking is this, the Jacksonville Tenants Association, as we're forming, that rents, where people live, is not a commodity that can be competed against by other people living in other move to another location. To get all your stuff, move it out to someplace else. All your business addresses, your phone addresses, everything is connected to that permanent address that you have. It's unreasonable to think that persons can just move around willy-nilly like they change storage lockers. This is not the case. This is their home. And also an emotional factor of it being their home where they live is something with their community, their neighbors and whatnot. But landlords have no right to essentially evict people by raising their rents to unaffordable rates when they can't afford to live there anymore. But now the proposal that I'm putting forth in my lawsuit is that once a landlord rents an apartment to a tenant, that is their right to live there without fear of their rents being irregularly raised. I'm proposing that we've lived here 22 years and have never had a rent increase more than the 3% cost of living raise, which in this area now is 5.6%. But what's the difference there? Now they want to raise it 20%, $200. So that's what the lawsuit is all about. And there's nothing to prevent them from raising it another 200 next year. And another 200, there's no security there. We're in our retirement, my wife and I, and the money that we've saved on a fixed income has to last us how many years to the rest of our lives. It's a very serious issue. We're emotionally involved with our apartment and with the community where we live, the convenience that we have to shop, and the doctors and whatnot are close by. So this is what the law said. I'm opposed. The law shoots read that people live somewhere and that they have to respect that not everybody's going to make all this money. There has to be low income, middle income, and high income housing zoned by the legislature, and particularly here in Duval County by the Common Council. And that the stipulation is that once an apartment is rented, that the landlord can't raise the rent above 3% modest or cost of living, whichever is greater. That's the lawsuit.
All right. Seems like rent control, a nice northern concept that may need to be put in place here in the Deep South.
Well, thank you, sir, for that support. I appreciate it very much.
I wish you success with that. Gary Koniz, management consultant, syndicated reporter, correspondent, and of course, candidate for Congress, the 4th District. Gary, thank you for joining us today. And I look forward to us having another conversation real soon. Let's get it scheduled and go into some other topics that we weren't able to touch on today.
I did enjoy it very much, Mr. Matthews. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good day.
Next up, Fred's Reviews, a look at movies of today. F9, released in 2021 to the big screen. It's a fast, furious, and grand ride.
Natural.
Of course I am.
Fast 9 is a triumphant addition to the franchise. Add a touch of Helen Mirren and a good dose of John Cena in a well-directed and well-written role, and you have one of the best action movies of the year. Ludacris and Tyrese Gibson hold up their roles as comic relief quite well. Director Justin Lin is to be credited with his control of the action and editing. This is a great flick for action movie lovers. I hope they don't ruin the franchise in Furious 10. I'd watch it again. F9, released in 2021. 9 of 10 stars. That's going to be it for this edition of To My Way of Thinking. Join us again next time.